So we are going to move into a little bit of, thank you so much. Um, a little bit of behavioral expectations and just a little bit about our community, a little bit of a deeper dive for you. Your students will get a fair amount of this, particularly during new student welcome, because we like to make sure that they are set up for success. And we're going to talk about making some good decisions. What are some of our community standards? You can start right there at slide 45. Yeah, or right where you are. Actually, you can just start the slideshow. And I am going to turn it over to Dean Dave Fleming. He is our Dean of Residence Life and Housing, and he also oversees student conduct. So I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about that. Full disclosure, since I did this with session 1 and session 2, he is my husband, and so if I stand too close to him or I'd like to make sure people know that I actually have boundaries with most people and appropriate boundaries, but sometimes I will stand too close to him. I'm like, what a weirdo. So that is, so he also has a 14-year-old and a 2-year-old. So there you go.
Wow, how do you follow that, right? Actually, how do you follow our students? They are great, aren't they? And your student is about to join us. And when I first started here at Mary Washington in 2015, I was interviewing and I asked about our student population here. And the thing that I heard over and over again is that our students have the biggest heart. They care for one another. They want to look out for one another. And I don't think that that comes by itself. It's not just one of those things that we throw people on campus and they're like, yay, I like other people. Hopefully most of them do. But I think it's the intentionality that we have regarding our expectations, what it means to be an Eagle. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're not going to dive real deep into it. For those of you who did not meet me yesterday during the housing presentation, I am Dave Fleming. I am the Dean of Residence Life and Housing and Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs. You just heard I've been here since 2015, but I have over 20 years of experience in residence life and housing and conduct. And so want to spend a little bit of time with you. Your students are going to come to Mary Washington, and they're going to be in charge of every decision that they make, from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to sleep. And so we here at Mary Washington provide some guideposts for them in order to do that. And these are the 4 big guideposts, or what I like to call channel markers, for those of you who like to boat. Any boaters in the audience? A few of you, great. I don't boat, but I'm going to use this as an analogy anyway. But these are a good channel marker, and so we've provided some guidelines, things that we've learned from experience, both nationally and here at the UMW, things that we value, things that we know when students veer away from it, they have the potential of causing harm, whether that's physical or mental harm to themselves or to others. And so you all heard a lot about Aspire from Dr. Shorter yesterday, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. Actually, we're not going to spend any time on that, but we do hold it close to our hearts as Mary Washington community members. We have a very strong honor code here. Any alum in the room? A few, yep. So you all know about the honor here at Mary Washington. We hold it very close to our hearts. It really focuses on individual and community integrity, and really focusing on, not lying, not cheating, not stealing, and really just being a stand-up human being every single day that you show up. Now, does that mean that you're going to be perfect all the time? Any perfect kids in your households? One, yes. There's always one in the crowd, but our students aren't perfect, and we know that. Our goal is to provide them some expectations and provide some guidance so that as they make decisions each and every day, they can determine their level of risk tolerance, which is a huge spectrum, give them a little bit of leeway to make those decisions, start to figure out in a relatively safe environment, do your behaviors match your values and the values of the place that you're either working learning or just living. And so that's what we do through Aspire, Honor, Title IX, which is highly regulated through the federal government, and your students will go through that, but that focuses on sexually based violence and discrimination. And then the Code of Conduct takes care of everything else that isn't covered by Honor and Title IX. So accountability at UMW, so we're not a high school, it is college. For those of you who are potentially first generation parents, I think the biggest difference is that we're not going to call you every time your student makes a bad decision and say, hey, Johnny went to the principal's office, you need to come and help us figure out what we're going to do with them, right? They are going to receive information about an alleged violation of one of these policies, and we will work through them to bring resolution to whatever that is. We do that all through learning, so our approach is very educational in nature. I've been at institutions where someone is publicly drunk on campus, perhaps to the point that they've passed out on the ground, and the police officer will come up, kick them to make sure they're alive, and then pin a summons on them. We don't do that here. In fact, our police department very rarely issues citations of any sort or arrests individuals. You've got to be doing something pretty serious for that to happen. I don't want to freak you all out because the majority of your students will never get involved in any of these processes from the standpoint of breaking policy. And if they do, it might be something really small, like more than 10% on their walls, right? Hangings on their walls, something like that. Maybe a minor, well, nothing is minor about fire safety, but it might be like an extension cord or something like that. A few of you will have students who violate our alcohol policy, perhaps our drug policy. We're seeing more and more marijuana on our campus. Just the nature of it being legal in Virginia, but still not allowed here on our campus. So we see some of that. A lot of that's through self-medication, a lot of anxiety, stress, and whatnot. Students have found that marijuana is the way that they like to relieve that. And so we'll work with them to perhaps find some other strategies. So again, we take an educational approach. Occasionally, those educational moments are pretty significant. The ways we have to do that becomes pretty significant. Again, that's a very small percentage of our population that engage in that, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. But overall, our goal is for our students to take ownership for their words, their actions, and their decisions that they make every single day. It's not someone else's fault. You own who you are and the decisions you make, and our goal is to get them to a place where they stand up and say, yep, I did that, not my most shining moment, but I did it, and what do I need to do to be restored into our community? And that's our goal, is we want to restore them back into the Mary Washington community so that they can be successful, but also so that other students in the community can be successful as well. Part of that is, so this is a student affairs favorite term, intent versus impact, and a lot of it is moving our students' thought process from the intent piece to the impact piece. And so usually when we're dealing with our students, and you all have teenagers at home right now, is that right? Is there ever a moment that they're not really thinking about anyone else but themselves? Well, that's the case here at college too, at least to start, is that 95% of the time, whatever they're engaging in is not because they intend harm on someone else. They're thinking, I'm bored, I'm stressed, I'm angry, I'm out for a good time, whatever it might be, and that's all they're really thinking about. But what they're not thinking about is the impact that they have on other individuals. And our goal is to move their thought process to, what kind of impact am I having? And when you're on a college campus, every decision that you make is going to impact at least one other person. Most often that's a roommate that you're living with. So if they're living at home, it might be impacting you all, depending on the decision they're making. But it is always someone. It might be someone in a classroom, it might be someone in the dining hall, it might be someone that they don't even know. And so one good example, so a number of years ago, I was at a different institution. It was orientation day, all right? And one guy in the evening was, I guess he was bored, because he wanted to know what it would be like to sit on a skateboard and use a fire extinguisher as his propulsion. And so he sat on it, and he let that thing go. Guess what? Nothing happened except for it made a huge mess, and our fire extinguisher was empty. And so he wasn't thinking about anything other than the fact that this could be fun, right? But what it impacted was our housekeeping staff. They had to come in, and anyone who has discharged a fire extinguisher knows it's this yellow powder that just goes everywhere. So every square inch of our floor had to be cleaned. So impacted our housekeeping staff, but it also impacted that community because now we have no way of eliminating a small fire if one were to occur, and so we're able to replace that. And so it's those sorts of decisions that through our conduct process that we want our students to start thinking about how their decisions impact other people. As we think about conduct, a lot of our cases around drugs and alcohol, students are experimenting and whatnot. And what our students, so we don't go running around looking for alcohol and drugs, right? It usually comes to us. We talked about marijuana yesterday in the Res Life presentation. It smells. That's usually what gets us on the call, right? Is that it smells really bad. Well, from an alcohol standpoint, it's not the alcohol that usually gets us to say, hey, what's happening there? It's the noise. As people drink more and more, they get louder and louder, and their music gets louder and louder. And so now they're impacting the entire floor because they wanted to just hang out with their friends, 3 or 4 friends in their room that's the size of a shoebox. But what they're doing is actually impacting everyone else. And so those are the types of conversations we have. I had one with a student, and I find these some of the most transformational experiences for our students. I hope none of them have to go through it, but when they do, these conversations that we have during conduct hearings and whatnot tend to be the most transformational for them. I had a student who, this was early in my career, 2 students, they were in my office because there was a beer can in the room, just one. So pretty simple infraction, not that major. They came in my office, swore up and down, not ours, friend brought it in, and so Facebook was new, and I was like, I wonder what kind of tool this is, and so I went onto their page, and I found a picture, and what it was these 2 guys sitting in chairs in front of a hockey bag with 2 cases of natural light sitting in I think it was a natural light. So I turned my monitor around and I said, can you explain this? And their mouths hung open. We talked about it. We're like, why are you lying about 1 can when you've got now 60 cans sitting in a picture which was clearly in your residence hall room? And so we had that conversation. Well, 2 years later, one of those guys became an RA for me. And he became one of the best RAs that I've ever had. I think because he understood what it is about making decisions and the impact that it can have on others. I believe he went into student affairs after that. So those conversations for us can be really impactful, and we really see a change in our students' behavior and really become a great member of our community. Again, we hope they don't have to go through them. We hope they're making good decisions on the front end, but we will work alongside them to make sure that that they can learn from any missteps that they have. These are the big ones, though, and these are the ones where that learning moment might mean you're heading home for either a short period of time or a long period of time. And so I want to put them up here because if you have any concerns about your student engaging in any of these behaviors, you're going to want to have a conversation before they head to college. Because what we don't want is you to be surprised when they're calling home and saying, hey, I've got to come home. And so they're not surprising. I don't think any of these are surprising as to why we would send them home. These are really, for us, creating a pretty big danger on our campus. And so physical violence or threats of violence, we don't have any tolerance for that. Obviously, sexual assault or other gender-based violence, we don't have tolerance for. Distribution of illicit and controlled substance. We can have a lot of educational conversations about possession and use. Once it gets into a potential distribution, we're talking about money And where there's money, there's people looking for money. Where there's people looking for money, there tends to be some violence. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping drug suppliers off our campus. So if there's evidence of that, that hearing is probably going to result in removal from the institution. And then obviously, if we're getting to a place where your student just isn't getting it, they've been in my office, well, they're very rarely in my office. I'm actually at the appeal level. But if they're in a hearing officer's office over and over and over again, we're probably going to say, maybe you're not ready to be here. And so that very, very rarely happens. Usually their understanding a recidivism rate is pretty low. In addition to that, so if your student lives on campus, obviously those first things are important to keep note of, but also we don't want folks tampering with fire prevention equipment. Again, that creates a huge safety issue when you've got a building full of 150, 160 people. So that's covering smoke detectors, which is a big one for people who want to vape in their rooms, because the vaping will set off our alarms. So they'll put a shower cap over their smoke detector. So that's a big one. Obviously, fire extinguishers, they need to leave them alone. But things as simple as exit signs. We had a rash of exit sign damage about 8 years ago over in Eagle Landing. Every weekend, 2 or 3 were coming down off the ceiling. Somehow we did a bunch of education and put a stop to that, but that's also part of our fire prevention. So people who don't know where the exits are can't get out of a building if it's on fire. And so I want to make sure that we're respecting our buildings, but also respecting the safety and the lives of others. Obviously, repeated drug offenses and willful destruction of property. Again, we love our buildings. We love our campus. I think a lot of you in the parent reception will say the moment we walked on campus, my kid knew this was the place. That's only in part by our ability to keep our buildings looking good. So I just want to, I think, have you all remember that good people make bad decisions, and so whether that's talking about your student or maybe another student who maybe your student's been impacted by, I would say that the vast majority of our students that are coming to campus they have good intentions, they're good people, and sometimes their decisions just go awry, and so as your students are calling you and saying, hey, this has happened, offering a little bit of goodwill, assuming goodwill, a little bit of grace and compassion will go a long way, and then really coach them and provide them guidance. What are your next steps? What have they asked you to do? What was your role in that situation? And how can you take responsibility for what happened? And obviously, if you all feel that you need a little more information from us, you can certainly call the Office of Student Conduct or Title IX, wherever this process is taking place, and we'll be able to walk you through some generalities. Your student would have to say to us, yes, you can provide every detail of my case in order for us to provide that. 2 of my favorite statements to you all, though, is number 1 is, oh, I just lost it. Getting old. First one is, maybe you want to go back and talk to your student a little more. And that means that there's more to that story. They haven't told you everything, but I can't tell you what the rest of that story is. And so being able to offer that opportunity. The other thing that I will say is, generally, when students are involved in this sort of incident, here are the likely scenarios to happen. And so that kind of gives you an idea of where your student is going to be in the process without me saying your student is going to be found responsible or your student is going to see these sanctions. And so I'm able to provide some generalities. If your student signs the release, I'm happy to share every bit of it. The students don't like to see when you all hear it from me, so they would much rather have you hear it from them. And we usually coach them through that as well. But again, we want you to advise, support, cheer on, challenge when appropriate, and let them make mistakes. This is a relatively safe place for them to make some mistakes. Hopefully, again, not the big ones on the previous slides, but let them let them steer a little bit off course so that they know how to get back on track on their own. Okay, so all of these are outlined. All of our policies are outlined on our websites. They're all up to date. The one big difference is Title IX is expecting some new regulations out of this administration. They have not become official yet, and so once they are, our Title IX office will start updating policies and whatnot. Most of it, I think, the changes will be around process and not policy. But that will be coming. Your students are expected to understand our code of conduct, our honor code, and all of those things. They'll get some modules over in July to be able to walk through that and understand that. I'm going to ask you all, it's dry stuff. It is, and most of our students are not going to look at it until they're in trouble. But the importance of doing that, and here's one good example, is that every year, so in 2 years, one of your students is going to sign an on-campus housing and dining agreement with us on February 1st when we open the application. And then in April, they're going to sign an off-campus lease and come back to us and say, well, I just picked you as a backup. And what they've done is they've signed 2 legally binding contracts, one with us, one with an off-campus lease. And they want us to let them out, and we don't. So that's the importance of reading things before you sign them, reading the expectations of what is here at the institution and what we want them to start learning as adults. So at some point we might get to a place where we let them out, but we let them sweat a little bit. But we don't want them, from a contractual standpoint, we don't want them thinking that just because we're an institution that we're going to say, don't worry about it, okay? But we're here for you. Feel free to always reach out. So there are so many people on this campus willing to support you all in this journey. We know it's not easy. We know there's a lot of anxiety, but we are here for you. And Dean Jones is going to come on and talk to you a little bit about that a little bit further. So, but thank you for your time. And I'm going to stick around, so if you have any questions for me after Dean Jones finishes, I will be here. Yep, sorry.
So Dave tends to be known as Dean Dave. The students call him Dean Dave instead of Dean Fleming. So it's, I guess, just alliteration. There you go. But he is, and his team is going to be a great resource for you, particularly for your students who live on campus. But he also oversees much of the crisis response on off campus, all of those pieces as well. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about supporting your student, what you need to know, what to expect in some of this transition, how things have changed, what you can expect to see in your student, what you might expect to see in yourself, how you can help them adjust and succeed, knowing some of the resources here that are on campus, continued conversations about establishing expectations from what we had yesterday, how to stay connected, and then there's some advice at the end from first-year students that they think parents need to have. So a quick overview, how things have changed. Largely, students are older, more ethnically diverse, higher percentage are women. We do still, at Mary Washington, have a relatively traditional population. Most of our incoming students are coming from high school and going into college. Of course, we know that some of that was disrupted by the pandemic. So we do have a couple of students who said, you know what, that pandemic happened, I'm gonna sit this out until we can get back to regularly scheduled programming. And so we do have some students who are stepping in after taking some gap time. But more students are also claiming their first generation status. And so if they are the first in their family to go to college, they are raising their hands and saying that. And that's great for us because we can provide them with appropriate resources in some different ways so that they know some of the things to expect in terms of navigating the institution. That's a little bit different from when I went to college. And I went to college, full disclosure, I went to college in 1992. Actually, in session 1, we realized there was a woman who was here in the parent session, and we were in the same co-ed fraternity together at UVA. So I was like, so I met her college student and said, "This is my 2-year-old." Great. So students are entering college with an idea of their major, but it's really common for them to change that major. It is, they get here, they try some different things on, and they find something that they love, or they get here, try some things on, and think, whoa, I thought I was going to be a doctor. Turns out, I don't like biology or chemistry, or I don't appear to have the acumen for that. This is not my jam. So that is not uncommon. They often will figure that out pretty early on in the first 2 years. One of the things that happens here, our students need to have at least 28 credits to declare a major, but most of them really will look into be in that second year by the time they start to declare. And they may declare and then get a step into it and be like, nope, 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 and back right on out. And figure out what their next step is. Graduation nationally can range anywhere from 4 to 6 years. We do still traditionally track on that 4-year rate. However, one of the things that happens with students, probably more so than was happening when I went to college, is life is happening. Life just happens for your students. And sometimes they have to take a step back. Somebody at home gets sick, and they're like, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be over there just for a semester. Or I just need to step out financially. I need to recalibrate. We help our students to do that if that's a thing that they want to do. We like to make sure we're catching them early on in the semester so that we can help to steer them in the right direction, particularly with coursework, et cetera, with their advisor, those types of things. But graduation ranges in part because things have just changed collegiately. And of course, technology keeps us interconnected. You've probably already texted with your student this morning. And so they're connected to you and what feels like everybody else. And so I'll tell you also, session 1 gave me pause because I said something about my 14-year-old being on YouTube and or wanting to like be a YouTuber. And I said, but you know, he's not. They said, that you know of. What? My world was rocked. So, just generally, what to expect. You can certainly expect a fair amount of change. That's going to happen regardless. Also, a mix of emotions. Whenever I talk to students, particularly, I get to work with these orientation leaders and a bunch of folks who are helping with the transition into college, and I ask them to put themselves back into where they were at this time when they were coming into orientation, stepping into college. And they all say, I was excited, I was nervous, I was anxious, I was so enthusiastic, I was so ready to get out of the house, I was so homesick. All of that is happening all at once. All at once. And so they are carrying all of the emotions all at once. And so expect that, and sometimes those emotions can lead to lots of talking, but also maybe some apathy. It feels like they're stepping out. Some of that is a little bit of an anxiety response. The overwhelm just kind of has them shutting down just a little bit, and sometimes they are talking your face off. They are just there with all of the energy because they're processing. So you can expect to see one, the other, or both of these things as they are transitioning, and sometimes as you are transitioning. They are also carrying possible disappointment. They're concerned about that. They're concerned about disappointing you. They're concerned about disappointing themselves. So you think about all of the hopes and dreams that you've had for your student, and you've had them for a really long time, and then they think about all of their hopes and dreams that they have for themselves. And so they're very, very concerned about disappointing anybody. The imposter syndrome is real. Do I belong here? Can I do this? I'm concerned. I haven't stepped into such a new environment ever before. I don't want to disappoint everybody who's watching me and supporting me doing this. And so sometimes that can be overwhelming. There's a lot of pride, particularly for this group. Listen, they did something that I certainly never had to do. They got to graduation through a pandemic. They've done virtual schooling, which might have been great for them, might have been awful for them, but they came out on the other side of it. And so they've already had to do some pivoting, have some resilience around things. That can also lead to some uncertainty. Like they really, and for most of you, that was probably their 10th grade year that just got yanked out from under them. Was it 9th, 10th? All of it. They were like, I don't know, all of it. What is time? What is time during that time? But then they're letting go, you're letting go, and they are growing. And they're really excited about that, but that's also a really scary thing. So changes for your student, homesickness, they're all homesick. Doesn't matter if home is right around the corner and they're living on campus, or if they're living in your house. They're all a little bit homesick because what they were coming from was a very familiar experience. And so sometimes when you step into something that is a little bit more challenging, you kind of just want to go back to that familiar, just from some comfort. More freedom for them, increased responsibility in regards to living a healthy lifestyle. Read into that what you will. They are making their own decisions around alcohol, around drugs, around sleep, around food, around all of these things. And they may have never done that before. When to get up in the morning, even though you know you're supposed to be up at a certain time to get a certain place, they're doing all of that. And then there's pressure that they're putting on themselves related to fitting in, getting good grades, can I do this, all of the things. That is pressure that is happening often internally, sometimes externally, because again, that goes back to possible disappointment. And then because they are around a lot of people who did not grow up in your house, there is always an exploration of values. Because if there are other people who did not grow up in your house, it just means that things were different in a different household. And so not everybody has the same values. And so they're going to meet people who are just different. Also, for many of them, they are going to be the decision maker. Woohoo! And so this is a good time to harken back to expectations. What decisions can your student make and what decisions can they not make? But they're going to be the decision maker for lots of the little things, the little day-to-day things that maybe they haven't had to make decisions about or even think about. Changes for parents. Many of you might have some empty nest syndrome. I saw those hands go up real fast yesterday when you were like, empty nest, yes. Some of you possibly have been waiting for this moment, and some of you might be like, oh, what do I do now? Wait a second. There's nobody to herd to get to where they need to be. More time, more freedom for the parent, often. What to do with this free time, what to do with this extra room, or what have you. There can be some ambivalence toward this because of that. Your familiar, your everyday is also changing. And it doesn't matter if you have another student at home. Every student is different. Your everyday is just changing. Worry, anxiety, or stress related to your student leaving. I could leave that last word out, like worry, stress, anxiety related to your student, period. Because on some level, isn't that what that is? Isn't that what children are? Just like worry, stress, anxiety. Wanting your student to be okay. Wanting them to have an experience where they're thriving. And sometimes watching them hit that speed bump and knowing that you know that they'll come out the other side. But your student may not always see that. And may not always understand that. So what students need? Support. They need to know that it's okay, that they're not perfect, all the time. They've never done this before, and sometimes they just need reminding that, well, you've never done this before. It's okay for you not to know all the pieces of it. The expectation that they will change and grow. I like to remind folks that all of those emotions that your students are carrying, you might be carrying all of those emotions too. Recognize that you might be carrying all of those emotions and try not to lay them at your students' feet, because I promise you, they will pick them up. I'm standing on this side of it with those students, and they will pick up all of your anxiety, stress, all of those things. And so finding a different place to put that so that you can kind of be in this place of support is going to be a really important thing for you to be able to do. That doesn't mean don't share anything with them, but just be mindful of that. Your students need a support network. You're here, you're already a support network. You're paying attention to this process. We're recording today, and so if you're even watching the recording, listen, they have a support network. They don't always feel that sometimes, and so sometimes they'll need little reminders that we got you, it's okay. They need to know that it's okay to fail. They just need to know that they're not going to get it right every single time. One of the things that we talk about is speed bumps. And so when you hit a speed bump, you've probably hit them in your life. And my guess is that you hit that speed bump, you learn something, and then you come out the other side. And what you know is you can look back on yourself at the age that your student is and remember some of your speed bumps. Maybe good people don't make the best decisions sometimes. So you can remember these moments, and you know that you came out and you're fine. What your student may not always know is that we all have them, and ultimately, it's likely going to be fine. They're likely going to be fine. Your students sometimes will take that as a characteristic. I failed, and that means that I can't do this, ever. So when I always like to, and I shared this with your student this morning, one of the things I don't do is I don't introduce myself as, I'm Dean Melissa Jones. I was a very high achieving high school student, had a big old scholarship when I went to college, and I got a D- on my first exam in college with a 19-point curve. That dude gave me 19 points to get me to D-. What? Are you kidding me? And so you wouldn't know that about me unless I told you, because I hit a speed bump, I figured it out, and it came out on the other side. Turns out I did succeed in college. I think I'm relatively successful. I feel good about where I am in life. Your student doesn't always see that because as their support network, we don't always share our speed bumps with them, right? You don't always come back and say, guess what I'm working through right now. That's just not a thing that we do. And so they don't always know the speed bumps that we've encountered. And so it's just good to remember and to remind them that you're going to hit those speed bumps. It's going to be okay. They also want a connection to their old community and permission to engage in their new community. And so if there's something going on with the dog, tell them there's something going on with the dog. Also, FaceTime with your pets. They absolutely love that. But they also want to be encouraged to create a new community, expand your community. These things are not mutually exclusive. You can have a both and. And so a lot of students will struggle with that. P.S. I got an A in that class, y'all. It was mathematically impossible, but office hours, tell your students, office hours. I went to that faculty member and said, I think I gotta drop this class. This is not going well. And he said, stick with me and come see me every week. Come to the class and come see me in my office hours every week. I got so much better at it that I got an A in that class. So it worked out. It was rhetoric and communications. It's so funny. Also, I remember all those things, right? So I don't know why the S is over there. Anyway, changes, your relationship with your student is going to change. Absolutely. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You're likely going to move from final authority to expert resource. And I'll tell you, one of the things that happens when that transition occurs is that you actually probably get more information from them. It's a deeper, richer relationship. And so, because they then feel like they can share things with you. And they start to see you as a three-dimensional, holistic person and not just mom, dad, parent, etc. So it's again a very rich thing. Relationships that might work: being a cheerleader, encouraging them, supporting them, being a consultant. That's kind of moving to expert resource. Challenging them when they need some challenging. Forecasting. If you do that, then maybe this other thing might happen because you're going to be able to see a little bit more. They really start to understand the breadth and depth and scope of your experience. Relationships that might not work. Being a lecturer, dictating some things to them, ignoring them. Please don't ignore them. They don't like that. Drop or enter. Listen, we need to talk about this. If you are living close to your student and you just don't drop in on them, give them a heads up. Give them a heads up. And in part because, listen, you don't need anybody dropping in on your house. I always think about it like my mother-in-law. I love my mother-in-law. Sorry, Victoria. I love my mother-in-law, but she doesn't need to know what my dust looks like. She doesn't need to know how dusty my house is. And so a little heads up is just nice to have. And so a private investigator, there's a lot of access to social media that we all have. And so private investigator really dovetails with interrogator. And so make sure if you're exposed to some social media, you can ask some questions about it, but maybe don't interrogate them. And this is one that your student might not agree with me, but ATM. ATM is probably not a thing that a relationship that will work for you. It might work for your student. So establishing your expectations, find out what their expectations are of you, or expectations even of this experience. You can start with, what is the expectation that you have of this experience? Maybe not of mom and dad or brother or sister or aunt and uncle, but maybe you start with this experience. But make sure to discuss those. Be open and willing to discuss difficult subjects. The ones that are not comfortable to discuss: grades, alcohol, drugs, relationships, travel, communication. How often are we communicating? Budget and finances. We had a discussion, I think it's session 1, about what's an appropriate weekly budget or monthly budget for your student. That's going to be different depending on your student. What is your student spending money on? I'm not sure. Like, maybe your student is like, I want to be able to go out to eat once a month. And maybe your student is like, I want to be able to take everybody out to eat once a month. Wait, what? I'm paying for you. Maybe I'm not paying for everybody. But those are going to be conversations, and it's a really great, easy, low threshold to get some of those conversations started. What does self-care look like? How much is your student sleeping right now? How are they going to figure out what they want to eat? Do they want to be able to cook something in the community kitchen? Those types of things. So if they don't know where you stand, they can't meet your expectations. If you don't know where they stand, then you can't meet their expectations. And what happens when people have expectations that aren't communicated about is that folks start getting mad, upset, resentful, etc. And so really one of the ways to head this off is to start modeling a little bit more of an adult relationship with your student. So help your student by maintaining perspective. You can see so much more than they can. Because they've got all of the stuff. And listen, this has been a fun-filled day and a half for them that they may or may not remember anything from. But hopefully they feel a little bit more confident and ready to tackle some of the things coming their way. Listen more, intervene a little less, ask them how they've tried to problem solve some of this themselves. Encourage the use of campus resources. So the dean's office, if they're struggling academically, there are lots of different resources, the Speaking and Writing Center, peer academic tutors, that type of thing. Their advisor, I was with them this morning, they have a lot of questions about classes and majors and minors and how am I going to be able to do this? How do I manage my time? How do you figure out when your exams are? Those types of things. So also, they're in a group me with their orientation leader. Their orientation leader is their orientation leader, not just for this day and a half, for the rest of the summer. So they can put their questions into that group me. They can direct message that orientation leader all summer long. When they get here in the fall, each of them will have a first-year seminar peer mentor. So they will then have an additional layer of upper class students who've been trained that they can ask these questions to. And sometimes that's a little bit easier for them, because they can ask those questions on the sneak if they need to. Listen, y'all, remind them to go to class. I just had this conversation with them this morning. This is an institution where you do have to go to class. It is very difficult to get an A in a class here if you do not go to it. And so even if you don't understand anything that's happening and you're like, everybody else gets this and I don't, go with your glazed eyes and sit in class. And then go to office hours. And what I told them is, at office hours, one of the things that your faculty is going to do is talk about the content that they got a degree in to be able to teach. They love this stuff. Let them talk to you about it. And so they are more than willing to help your student, but they also really value the relationships here. And so if life starts happening to you and you need an extension, you're probably more likely to get it if you've been to class and started really nurturing that relationship with that faculty member. Resist the urge to fix it for them. And you've been doing this for a long time, right? Resisting that urge. But that's a hard thing to do. One of the things that our office, and CJ is part of the dean's office, if you need some assistance, and even Dean Dave, or really any of these people, call us and we can coach you through it. How do I have this conversation with my student? Because I feel like they're struggling with something. We're happy to do that and give you some resources. Encourage them to get involved and to find their people. Students who are involved outside of the classroom in clubs, organizations, events, etc., are more likely to graduate with a higher GPA, and they're more likely to graduate on time. And it's probably going to feel a little bit counterintuitive to your student at any given time. It is an important piece of their enrichment. And you on some level know this because it's not like you've just gone to work and come home, and never done anything else. Because even when you're doing things at home, that's a whole other extra involvement. Just raising kids. Be genuinely curious. Ask them a bunch of questions. Just find out more about them. One of the best things I did during the pandemic was I was like, I'm just going to let my then 12-year-old, I'm just going to let him talk. Y'all, I learned so much about Minecraft. I cannot. So much Minecraft. But it was so great for our relationship because he just talked, and to this day, he will come and be like, listen, I got to tell you about this new update in Minecraft, because God bless him. Y'all, I'm fine not knowing, but he loves telling me about it. He's like, oh, she cares so much about Minecraft. So just some tips and tricks. The first 6 weeks are pretty critical time. And so one of the things that we talk about in the first 6 weeks, it's a great time for them to start to get acclimated to campus. And I think about it like the pool. If you step in a pool, it's real cold. You keep backing out, it's always going to be cold. And so make sure that you're, on some level, pushing them in to the pool and say, it's okay. I'm going to challenge you to leave them here. for the first 6 weeks. Now, Labor Day is a 3-day weekend. Live your life how you feel like you need to live your life. You know, if you got time and you want to have some family time, like you've been gone for a week and a half, get yourself back here so I can look at your face. That, I think, is fine. But for those other times, I'm going to challenge you to leave them here and encourage them to stay here so that they start to get acclimated. They build that connective tissue with the campus. They start to feel like this is my place. Encourage co-curricular activity. Club Carnival happens on the Wednesday of the first week of classes, so that is August 30th. And there are over 150 clubs, so they can start to get connected and get involved. Encourage them and listen to them. You're already doing these things. Reach out to us, to them. Keep an eye on the calendar and know the resources, and if you don't know, just call. We're just happy to share whatever resources we know of that might not be top of mind for you. That's perfectly fine. So just some quick don't miss pieces. I like this. Most of these are during new student welcome. I have to pull out Playfair. It is, move-in is on the 23rd. This is on the 24th. Let me tell you what this is, y'all. This is a giant thing of icebreakers. And your student will be like, I'm not going to that. I can figure this out on my own. But they've never done this before, right? Playfair's been around for a long time. I did it when I was in college. And I'm still friends with the people that I met there. And so it's worth it. Even if your student is like, ooh, I got a lot of social anxiety, come sit on the side. Because you're not going to be the only one. And so then you'll end up talking to somebody who's hanging out over here. And then we watch them walk off together at the end of Playfair. This is great. This is why we're doing it. Totally intentional. President has an ice cream social at his house. There's Club Carnival, cross-cultural barbecue, great place to get a lot of cultural foods. That is on the first Thursday of the first week of class, first Friday. If your student Club Carnival seems like it's going to be too overwhelming, in the first 4 weeks, all of those clubs have their own interest meetings. And so your student can go to that interest meeting, and it will be, and we'll publicize those dates when those clubs set them. They'll have, we'll have those publicized by Club Carnival. Student employment, I actually heard you all ask about student employment. That is a good low threshold way for your student to get involved. If you get to second semester and you're finding that your student still hasn't found a rhythm and needs to get connected, student employment is a great way to do that. Very, very low threshold, because your student is not the only one working wherever it is they're working. And so suddenly they're friends with, oh, well, this person here, and then they go hang out over here. And then they meet their friends, et cetera. It kind of grows into a family. And so it's a great, on-campus employment, it's just a great low threshold way to get there. CORE is our community outreach and resources. They do a lot of community service, and that is also a very low threshold way. Because maybe we're all just coming here and making dog toys together and kind of talking. Okay, all right, now I've met some people. These are really, really good low threshold ways for your student to get connected. Family Weekend is October 6th through 8th. I encourage you to attend that. That is the weekend before fall break. Really clear for you. I need to make sure that you know. It's likely that you're going to have to take your student and someone else to dinner if you come. Just go ahead and plan for it. And if you want it to be only one other person, that's another good establishing expectations thing. I'm not taking your entire suite to dinner. And so if that's not a thing that you want to have happen, be really clear. But they will absolutely want you to take them to dinner off campus. And then they'll be excited to show you their lives here, their rhythms. I always like to make sure that folks have this. This is large events through the year for your student. This is not an exhaustive list, but there is always something going on here. So every week, we got a ton of varsity sports that are happening also on campus. It would be too much for me to put all of that up, but you can find a rugby game, you can find a baseball game, you can find soccer. field hockey, those types of things. But then we've got all of these other pieces that are happening on campus that your student can take advantage of. These, almost every single one of these are free, and if there's not, there's usually like $1 or canned foods. So it's really easy to access these things. And then over 150 clubs and organizations that we have. If your student is into sports or wants to be in the sports, we have 21 club sports. They do not have to have any experience with the sport to be able to go and learn how to do it. So if your student's like, I want to learn how to play volleyball, or I'm a Quidditch player, and this is because Quidditch is a team, y'all. So just, again, being really, really mindful of some of these. We've got a lot of smaller events, lots of open mic nights. Your students asked about open mic nights. They asked about literary magazines. These are mostly student-run things, so it's really easy to get involved. You just don't have to have any experience at all. It's also really easy to form a club yourself, 4 other people. You got a club. So if I like pancakes, y'all 4 like pancakes, we got a pancake club, y'all. It's just not hard to do. Coordinated care, you actually heard CJ talk a little bit about this. There's a group of us that meets every week. And we ask the first-year seminar peer mentors, anybody you're concerned about at all? We ask their first-year seminar faculty, everything all good? And they let us know if this person's not coming to class or I'm concerned. Their behavior has really changed, and I'm concerned about that. And so we put them on what we call coordinated care. And we do some gentle follow-up, and sometimes it's a little less gentle because we gotta seek out the student. Tell your student not to ghost us if they hear from one of us, because they're not in trouble. We're just asking the question, are you okay? Things going okay? Have things got overwhelming? And so if I get a report in one space that a student has stopped going to this class, I'm gonna check with the other faculty. Are they coming to their other classes? How are they doing? Another little piece for you to know is right around fall break, midterm progress reports come out. You can get a U, an S, or an N. A U means you're unsatisfactory. An S means you're satisfactory. N means you never came to class, ever. And so you're likely gonna get dropped from that class, or withdrawn, rather, from that class administratively because we know you're not gonna pass it. And so those, if you all remember delegated access, you don't have access to that. It's not even an option. That's a great opportunity for you to have a conversation with your student about how our midterm progress. How's that looking? They should get one in every class. We do a proactive reach too. If students have 3 U's, we're gonna reach out specifically to you. How are things going? And we can actually start coaching. How do you have some of those conversations with your faculty? One of the things that's going to happen for your students is they're going to put all their little syllabi out and realize that none of these people coordinated with each other. And they're like, wait, I got 3 exams on the same day. And so we can start to coach them on how to have some of those conversations with their faculty, and what some of the best next steps are, and sometimes how to have conversations with you all. So quick dates to remember. It's like a casino in here, so I don't even know what time it is. So, sorry. It is. I was like, well, I don't know what time it is. But these are good days for you to remember. This is the classic 16-week schedule. So if your student has an 8-week class, most of them won't. But if they do have an 8-week class, know that some of those dates change and are a little bit more compressed. And so you'll want to be thoughtful about this. I gave you the 16-week dates, but this is good to know. The first day of classes is the 28th. Their last day to add a class is really the end of that week. Because after the first week, you can't really do a whole heck of a lot of catch up. They can drop a class up until a little bit into September. That's where they are like, this is not my jam. This is not for me. they can also withdraw from a class up until October 27th. And so as they are withdrawing, that just means a dropped class won't appear on your transcript anywhere. A withdrawn from class just appears on your transcript, but it appears as a W. Their last day to withdraw from the entire semester is the last day of class of the semester. So that finals, December 11th through 15th, we'll teach them how to read the final schedule because it's a little bit different. So they'll learn a lot of this in their first year seminar. Their first year seminar, just so you all know, is, I think sometimes we can think about it like a University 101 class. It's not. It is really the foundational class that they need to be set up for success for the rest of college. So they will have something they have to present. They will have a research paper to do. They will have, it's a pretty intensive class, but it sets you up for success for the rest of your collegiate experience. Staying connected, write them letters. They'll get their mailboxes in the beginning of August. It'll help you, it'll help them. Send them cookies. Imagine that they are going to immediately share those with everyone else. So this is the Eagle Family Connection. You all are probably already in the Eagle Family Connection because admissions starts you in there. They will migrate over, but anybody can sign up for this. So if you got grandparents who want to sign up for this, have at it. If you got aunts, uncles, everybody, knock yourself out. You can set up your own profile. And so you can tell us a little bit about your student. Is your student first gen? Is your student an athlete? And you'll get relevant information. You can also decide how much you want to hear from us. Is it weekly? Is it every other week? Is it once a month? You can decide those things. This is a little advice from first year students. I'd like to give you a second to just skim that. But they're saying, listen and loosen the reins. Allow and encourage your student to think critically, make decisions on their own. Let them make some mistakes. They're going to eventually find their path. Have some faith in that. Listen, make sure your student has some real life skills. Easy Mac requires water. And so if you put it into the microwave without water, it's going to catch on fire. And the fire alarm's going to go off, and everybody has to stand outside. So just all of the things. Also, if you're going to reheat pizza, take it out of the box. That box is cardboard. And if you put it in the oven, it's going to catch on fire. Every year. Yeah. Forget aluminum foil. Yes, no metal or aluminum foil in the microwave. Doesn't work. So, yeah, and we know that they're all learning some things, but yes. Let the kids be on their own, but don't be afraid to remind them about things to help them get used to. They've never done some of these things before. They've never made their own appointments. That is the thing that we know is a little bit paralyzing for students. Like, I gotta call and make an appointment. I literally will have them sometimes come sit in my office. Come sit in my office then. You can call, and I'll just sit here. And we'll do it together. It's okay. So send and post pictures of the siblings, pets. Tell them what's going on at home. Help them to set realistic expectations for that first year. Make small mistakes. And again, just reminding them that it's not the end of the world when you make a mistake. Don't stress. My mom was worried that we were not ever going to be as close. But now you're closer than ever. I had a mom who was checking in to orientation last summer, and she said, oh, my son's grumbly. He's not talking to me. He's very grumpy, and he won't let me stay. And so she's like, I'm just standing here watching him check in. And I said, that will change. This is just a lot of anxiety response. That will change. And she says, you know what? I have an older son who is going into his senior year at JMU. He's delightful now, which was great. And she's like, yeah, you know what? He was kind of the same way, and he's great now. We talk all the time, and we just talk a little differently than maybe we used to. Don't ask them if they're homesick. You know if they're homesick. Encourage them to get involved in something. Have an open conversation with them. Know the dates. Encourage them to know their requirements for their scholarships or financial aid. We try to do the same thing. Some of their financial aid, you got to be at least 12 credits. And so want to be really thoughtful about those pieces. That is, I assure you, a piece that your student is probably not thinking about. So encourage them to do that. Discuss a realistic budget, whatever that looks like for you all. Remind them of the campus resources. Remind them that they can come to listen. Our office, mine, CJ's, we're all on the 3rd floor of the CRUC. And so they can find us pretty easily walking to the dining hall. And so it's perfectly fine if they just need to come in and be like, I'm lost and I don't know what to do. Like, I'm lost in life. Okay, that's fine. They don't have to do it alone, but you also don't have to do it alone. Expect the unexpected, and let them know what's going on at home. They do want you to make big batches of soup and freeze it. That doesn't change for the first year, just so you all know. That is universal. Make some food for your students. They're also going to share it, just so you, you know. Remind them that they are always welcome to come home, even if they don't come. Maybe that first 6 weeks, say, I want you to stay here. But whenever you need to, also, if you want to come and visit them, please do. It doesn't have to be family weekend. You could just come for like a random Saturday or Sunday. That's really exciting for them. Take them off campus. They want you to pay for some food. This is just a fun thing. Like mom and dad, some of the difference in texts that are received. So, interestingly enough, they have hopes and dreams and excitement for you. They're excited when you do things that are not related to them. And that doesn't change. My mother retired, and she is living her best life with her girlfriends. I was like, well, we might come down for this. Oh, I'm going to be out of town that weekend. Okay. So they're really excited to be able to watch you step into a different part of your life, too. And so go on a date night. Your student's going to be okay. I always like to leave you with this. You've gotten your student here. Your student is stronger than they know. Your student is smarter than they know. And you have always known that about them. Trust what you have done to get them here. They're going to take some steps, and they're going to be a little bit wobbly at first. And that's okay, because you remember when they were wobbly the first time and the times after that. Trust yourself. Trust your student. They need that trust. They need your confidence in them when they're struggling a little bit. This is our information. Our partnership will continue. This is not the last time that we'll be seeing each other or talking to each other, I'm sure. And that's perfectly okay. We absolutely know that this is a big investment of time, energy, money, resource, all the things. And so I just have to say we are honored that you have decided to make us part of your village, because we know it takes a village to get folks where they need to be, to get your student across that stage. And so we're excited in what this journey offers. So I'll be here, down here. If y'all have any questions, feel free to find me. You can find Dean Dave. And I know your students are probably like texting you, like, where are you? Your students, just so you are aware, their luggage is at the CRUC. That's where you had your meals yesterday. And so their luggage is on the 3rd floor. They're probably right around there waiting for you. Or sometimes they come down here waiting for you because they can't wait to see you. You're so important to them. They won't tell you that. Also, they've been listening to you. I have to tell you that. They've been listening to you this whole time. And they tell us stories about it. And so thank you for sharing your student with us.